Going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker, who is Mary Chaney. Now, I met Mary a number of years ago. I lose track of time exactly when. If I remember correctly, it was at another SANS event in Dallas, if I'm remembering that correctly. And over the years, she's spoken at a number of SANS events and chaired some other SANS summits as well. And she's got a long history in the industry, been a security leader at organizations like the FBI, General Electric, Johnson & Johnson, Comcast, Esperion. She's also an attorney, and a professor at the University of Cincinnati, and is the chair and CEO of Minorities in Cybersecurity. And well, hey, it's needless to say that she knows a thing or two about privacy and how it relates to cybersecurity. So Mary, welcome. The floor is yours.
Hi, thank you so much. Can you guys hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Okay, all right, great. Thank you so much, guys. First of all, I would like to say, for those that may have joined earlier, I apologize. I'm a single mom on top of everything else that I do. And my daughter got her braces off today. So yay for her. Popcorn is in store for later. But thank you guys so much. Thank you, SANS, for having me here to present. Let's see if my clicker is going to work here. I'm not able to advance the slide, guys. Oh, there we go. There we go. All right, here we go. 5 things CISOs needs to know about privacy. As Frank pointed out, I have over 25 years in this space, information security, privacy, and risk management. I used to work for the FBI. I used to go out there and catch cyber criminals. Had executive roles with GE Capital, J&J, and Comcast, and I am currently a director of information security and privacy for Esperion Therapeutics, also chairwoman, CEO, and president of Minorities in Cybersecurity. So we're going to talk about the top five things CISOs need to know. First of all, you don't have to be a lawyer or play one on TV, but you actually need an attorney friend. And this is why I say that. The first thing you need to know is because privacy laws and trends really touch on what you do in the information security space. You have the GDPR, and then with Brexit, UK, GDPR, Canada, China. You actually, these are nations that actually have a national privacy law. That means it covers everything, no matter what business you have, no matter what industry you're in. If you actually hold personal information, you fall under these laws. The United States, of course, does not have a federal privacy legislation. It's all secretarial. It all depends on what sector of the industry that you're in. Banking has theirs, healthcare has theirs. Of course, if you're dealing with children, you have those. Telemarketing, of course, has its own level of privacy related laws and things like that. And so the federal space is a mess. They're trying to put something together federally, but who knows when the United States is going to get its act together. And then your individual states, of course, California, Virginia, Colorado, they have comprehensive laws, meaning it does not matter what business that you're in, these laws now apply to you. And if you collect personal information, these laws will say you have to protect that information in a certain way. And there are 30 other states that are at various stages of enacting privacy laws. Of course, at the federal level, there are a couple that have received traction. We don't know where it's going to go. The states are moving much faster than the federal government in that regard. And so the way these things interact with one another is a lot of these privacy legislations, it touches on information security in as much as knowing the data, knowing how you're protecting that data and things like that. Thing number 2, not all privacy data breach laws are created equal. Now, I have my CISSP and my CIPP. The CIPP is the Certified Privacy Professional in the US. And when I was studying for the CIPP, I had to deal with the state data breach laws. And there's my face when I'm trying to deal with the state data breach laws, because all 50 states, including the District of Columbia, Guam, Puerto Rico, US Virgin Islands, all have data breach laws. Personal information, they all define that differently. Some rely on HIPAA, some covers healthcare information, biometric data. Illinois has their biometric act that, they've been knocking people over the head about. Home Depot, I believe, had to settle because the cameras were actually getting people's faces and things like that. And then mother's maiden name is also now included in personal information definitions, because again, one of the ways that you can actually breach someone's account is by knowing the mother's maiden name. That's the obvious question that people ask. Covered entities, that changes by state. Now, it's all businesses that are located within the state, but what Texas does, because that's where I am, they say if you are a citizen of a state that doesn't have protections, you're covered under Texas law. So this is why I say you guys have to understand exactly what is being asked of you in the situation and when you're trying to deal with this data and how to protect this data on the information security side. And this is directly related, the security breach aspect of it. Unencrypted data is always gonna get you dinged. If it's unencrypted and it gets out there in the public domain, you're likely going to have to report it. But some states include encrypted data if the keys were also stolen in the breach. So that of course, it's like, okay, so now I have to know, Security Operations Center folks, exactly if they took the data, if it was encrypted, did they get the keys too? Because if they get the keys, that's unencrypted, right? Or by law. And some states are now doing this access versus exfiltration. So Puerto Rico, Florida, Connecticut, New Jersey, Rhode Island, and New York, at the time that I drafted this slide, they made the difference between access and exfiltration. And I have a story here, because those within the Security Operations Center, I've dealt with a lot of breaches in my time. And, I've dealt with a lot of lawyers in my time. And there is this thing, semantics, that can be played when it comes down to the knowledge of whether or not things were taken out. Of course, we all know on the back end, if you have the appropriate SIM placement, you have the appropriate logs in place, you kind of sort of know, or you can potentially kind of sort of see what happened. But if it wasn't exfilled, meaning that you can't prove that they took it out, then it's not necessarily a quote unquote security breach. Well, now there are those states that say, if it's been accessed. So if somebody even just opens a file, that is considered access, and that could be considered a security breach. So all of these laws are important in the sense that you have to understand when you have reporting requirements and when you don't. Who, when, what, who, when, what, and how. Paper records are normally excluded, except for those states mentioned in the slide. In Texas, you get 60 days to notify the Attorney General if more than 200 residents were actually impacted. So in each state, those requirements, 45 days, some have 30, so it's knowing those laws and knowing what those reporting requirements are is why you need to be friends with, get you an attorney friend, so they actually know what's going on. The last thing you want to find out is when you're actually in the breach scenario, when you've had a breach. Now you got to go out and try to figure everything out. You need to understand this stuff before as you test that incident response plan, and you realize, and you put that statement in there. Do you know the types of citizen data that you have? Are you global company, United States company, or are you just a Texas company, or Ohio company, or anything like that? So, and every 35 states have data destruction laws. That doesn't matter what size you are. So again, how this works in my world, in my mind, is if you have to destroy it in paper form, you should destroy it in electronic form. That's data destruction. That's true data destruction. And as much as if I have, let's say, tax records, 7 years, anything later, or later than 7 years, I can destroy 8 through whatever. I can destroy all the data. It should be destroyed as well on the electronic end as well. And that's where sometimes you have a gap. You keep stuff on your computer or on your network that, by law, you should have destroyed. So when you have that breach, you get dinged in that regard. Thing 3, data privacy is your problem too, whether you think about it in that way or not, right? So you have this interplay, you have this friction, you have this natural, what are we going to call it? Competition, I guess, between the lawyers and the IT folks and on who's being smarter, right? And everybody speaks in their own languages. But what we do know is our security problems keep growing, right? The more technology moves forward with cloud, AI, machine learning, IoT, the more security issues that we have to address. And if we don't address those at that particular time, then of course, a breach in the cloud is still a breach, and it's still your problem, right? Our old problems that we didn't fix when it was in our networks are now, moving forward and being seen in other areas, right? And your data, where's your data? Your data is everywhere, right? Data privacy is concerned with the actual personal information, right? And so where is that information? Do you collect it? What are you going to do about it? How are you securing it? If it's encrypted, that's good. But again, how you have to know what's going on. And then, our breaches still happen, right? Old gaps, our old security gaps continue to get exposed regardless, right? And that similar problems with new technology. In my law practice, before I went back into corporate America, I give you another example. I had a potential client call me, and the story went that the constable came to this individual, his house. The constable came to his house to do a wellness check on his wife or girlfriend. I can't remember which one it was. And he stated to me that, okay, we got into an argument. Yes, we did. She went upstairs, and he was like, as you do when you're in a relationship, you continue to talk to the walls, thinking no one is listening, right? And what happened was the constable came and did a wellness check, and he could not understand how in the world, because the girlfriend didn't call the police, how in the world did the constable even know that this argument had taken place the previous day? Well, Alexa was listening. Now, what was going on at this time, this was a couple years ago. I guess it was 2019, 2020 is a blur. So I'll count it in 2019. Let's see, Apple, Amazon, Android, they got in trouble because they were collecting what they were calling snippets, right? And they were having people listening to the snippets. So the thing that you agree to on your phone, when you're on these devices, when you click through the agreement, they were collecting sample recordings to ensure that the AI was working appropriately, right? And so, but they were having individual people review these snippets. So the only thing, and they got in trouble for it, and the only thing that we could come up with as I was talking to this gentleman is that his device, that's the only thing that was on. He said he unplugged it. He got rid of all the devices, but his device was listening. Someone must have heard the snippet of him yelling or screaming or saying something derogatory and then called the police. So those things happen out there. So you have this privacy issue, and you have this, this security issue, and it's only going to continue to blossom and get bigger. The problems are going to get bigger as we continue to have technology moving as fast as we do. So thing 4, beware of shadow IT storing PI. And I'm speaking from personal experience on this one, because asset inventories are not fun, but you have to do it. And I'm not just talking about IT and security asset, I'm talking about privacy assets. And what I mean by shadow IT storing personal information is there are things that are in HR and there are things that are in finance, and there are things that are in marketing in certain places that have personal information that on-site IT, company IT has no visibility into at all, but you are still required by law to ensure the security of those, of that information, right? And it's not, it's they're running it. It's the HR, marketing, finance teams, et cetera, that are running these technologies, but it's still your responsibility as an organization to ensure it's secured. And it will fall on the information security team, whether you like it or not. If a breach happens, if by someone in your finance department or someone in HR, right? And I do want to say, usually when it comes to personal information, employee information is not protected. Meaning in the United States, if your company that you work for loses your information, it's not considered a breach. They don't have to report it to anybody. They may tell you, they may not tell you. However, California, CPRA, the newest California Privacy Act in 2023, that is now going to require protection of employee information. So all of those management systems that you have, payment processing systems that you have, you're going to have to at least, especially, and then don't get me started on about third-party risk management. If they're managed by a third party, you have to have a robust third-party risk management program to ensure that that third party is reputable, that they are actually securing the information. You're responsible to assess. You just can't hand over. Like I said, don't forget your cloud access, right? I'm sorry, your cloud assets. Putting something in the computer or in someone else's cloud doesn't mean you can transfer the responsibility, because if the breach happens, depending on if you're infrastructure as a service or platform as a service or software as a service, the requirements, if you don't have some type of cloud access security broker or something that's monitoring that environment, because if you're just storing data in Amazon and AWS, and that's all you're doing, I can guarantee you, unless you're paying for it, Amazon is not monitoring your cloud infrastructure to determine if there's any unauthorized access in there. You can't transfer that risk to Amazon. It's still yours, and you have to have visibility in those things, okay? So thing 5, let me see how I am on time. Okay, thing 5, information security and privacy will forever be linked, so get used to it. So now, this made for TV movie drama that I'm about to share with you guys. Once upon a time in Mary's world. Now, I want to say nobody was hurt, physically hurt, but this was actually a pretty interesting thing that I wanted to share with you guys about how the intersection of what information security think they're doing and how it can bleed into privacy. So my life, my world. I'm driving to pick up my daughter from school, and I get a call from, now my daughter and son go to different high schools. So I'm driving to pick her up. I get a phone call from Mansfield Independent School District. Shout out to Mansfield, my school district, from the high school that my son says. And they tell me that at 2:00 in the morning, my son was downloading porn. And I sat back. Now the assistant principal, poor thing, the assistant principal tells me this. And I was like, huh, I said, that's interesting. And he proceeds to tell me how, the kids don't know it, but they have monitoring tools and they're required to monitor devices, blah, 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 blah. Now, my son had just recently received the school device like a week before. So, of course, Mary's world, I'm like, okay, how do we know you wiped this? But let's go on. So they tell me this, and they talk about, the Mansfield Police Department, and they don't tell us what it is. They don't show us what it is, but this is it could be child porn. We didn't see it. And I said, I'm a former FBI agent, so I'll be interested to talk to Mansfield Police Department about exactly what they found on what they think they found on my son's school device. I said, as a matter of fact, I'm gonna need you to get me the MAC address. I'm gonna need you to give me the IP address, because if it's coming from my house at 2:00 in the morning, the IP address should come back to my house. I said, I'm gonna need you to tell me the application. I'm gonna need you to tell me the duration of the activity and any other identifying information that you can provide to me so I can try to track this down. I said, I'm in the car. I said, I will look at my network logs when I get home. Now, I'm talking to the assistant principal whose head probably exploded at the thought. I said, but I'm in the car driving, and my daughter and son's reaction was priceless, right? So my daughter, as I was talking to the guy on the phone, I said, I was telling her, I said, I just have questions. And she shook her head and she says, oh no, Mansfield Independent School District, she's a problem. And I started texting my son. Yes, I'm sorry, I was texting and driving, because of course I'm like, what are you doing? And he was like, Mom, I don't know what they're talking about. They brought him to the office to quote unquote warn him about this point. So I'm speeding, trying to get home to get to my logs. So I'm speeding, I'm getting home, and I'm checking my logs. Now, I'm a network security person by training. So when I say this network in my house is completely locked down, to the extent that, let's see, I have 3 different networks. I have my office network, which I'm on now, and then I have the main network, but I also have my security cameras on a different network, and I have my IoT devices on a different network. Different using it. Yes, I know, don't judge, but that's what's going on in my house. On top of that, my children's internet shuts down at 9:30. So they have different profiles on my network. All their devices are attached to their profiles. I can shut their internet access down at any given time from my phone. And so I couldn't understand why he's saying 2:00 in the morning, because none of my children's devices had an internet connection at 2 a.m. So I said, my son comes home and he gets the questions, right? And I'm like, okay, kid, I said, I'm gonna need you to tell me what's going on. He's like, I said, did you were you doing anything on your school device? He said, no. I said, I said, what? I said, did you do anything on any other device? He said, well, Mom, I was playing Discord this weekend and somebody sent me a link. I clicked on the link. Click on the link. And then it took me to a Google Drive, and that's where the stuff was. And he can't even say porn. He says stuff. And I was like, I said, were you signed into your Google account on your PC? He said, yes. I said, okay. So you're signed into your Google account on your PC, your phone, your school device, and your he has a tablet. I said, Google automatically syncs all of your activity across your devices. Anywhere you're signed in, it syncs, right? So if you did something on your personal computer, whenever that device gets an internet connection, it's now going to sync across all devices that you're logged in under your school account. So log out of everything. Okay, we go and we determine that he has not 1, not 2, but 3 viruses on the computer. And so we clean all that up. He signs out of everything. And so I go to my network logs, and sure enough, at 2:00, they were right. At 2:00 in the morning, there was a download happening from his iPhone. So now I have a different set of questions, which is, from a privacy perspective, why in the world are you, school, threatening or trying to intimidate or accusing my son of something that he was doing on his personal account? So why are you monitoring the personal account? So now that goes back to the syncing issue, right? And so I sent the assistant principal an email and CC the principal, because we have to deal with the principal now, asking all of these questions. I'm going to have my CTO and cybersecurity person talk to you. And I said, okay. So now this is the fun part. You don't really get to have a lot of fun This was fun for me to talk to my school district about the security things that they're doing to monitor devices, because from a global perspective, they can turn off that syncing functionality. If they're one-to-one devices, okay, and you're only concerned about what's happening on your school device, actually, they shouldn't be able to download anything to these Chromebooks. Stop it at that level. I said, because if these kids are logging into to their school accounts, you can prevent the activity from their personal accounts syncing to their school account if you just drop that from at the global perspective. So I talked to the folks, first of all, in response to my question about MAC addresses, IP addresses, applications, blah, blah, blah. They said, we have none of that information, which I knew. And then the question was, this is what we saw. We saw something in his Google Drive, and that's what tripped. They're like, well, he's not in trouble. I said, I know he's not in trouble. I said, because that's a different level of Mary, bad mom type of thing, activity, because you can't suspend him or do anything to him based on something that you cannot prove, right? And so it was at that particular point that the school offered me a consulting gig. They came to me and said, you know, as I went through it, I told them and we talked through it. And I said, okay, so, you know, my network at my house is this way. And they were like, oh my God, you need to come over and talk to us about what we're doing and what we could potentially doing wrong. So all that to be said, it was a funny story. It's a funny tidbit. No, my son was not hurt. He did get under the lights of the FBI investigation. And so, you know, the school survived, mommy survived, and it all is right. But all I'm saying is we're collecting a lot of data, right? And we, as, you know, information security, IT, privacy people, we have to understand the interplay between these things and between these concepts. So just the simple triggering of a monitoring email alert based on activity that's on a personal device, that's a problem for me as a privacy professional, right? And so the school, from a technological perspective, needs to take take action to prevent that from happening. Because you call a parent not knowledgeable, they just got the wrong parent. You call a parent that doesn't know these things, and then the parent is mad, is pissed off at the child. The parent is, you know, feels threatened by the school, you know, and the whole Mansfield Police Department thing, that was even unnecessary. So the problem that we're facing is that the internet of everything is everything, and not knowing that these things are collecting this type of data across the board can put you in a precarious spot. So my advice, shut off the syncing capability on your browser from every Google account that you have if you don't want these problems. It wouldn't be a problem for a professional, hopefully. But it was a problem. It wasn't really a problem for my son. It was a problem for the school. So I will stop there. And I think I have a few more minutes here for questions if there are any.
Hey, Mary, that was an awesome story. That was so good. That reality TV story, right? Like you said, it is made for TV. So I am tempted to just stop there. You know, you always want to end on a high note like that, which is great to end your presentation with a story, but we've got so many questions. You know, we're going to go ahead and dive into some of these. And, you know, first one here, Norman asks, hey, well, what do you think about applying GDPR as a baseline from which to begin wherever you might be in the world? You know, what do you think about that?
Well, you know what, from a legal perspective, it's always a situation where you want to go with the most restrictive law, because if you go with the most restrictive law, then you're able to comply. And what you guys need to understand is all of the GDPRs and the existence of these privacy legislations really has to do with government interference or intelligence operations, people not wanting to be able to get to an individual person based on something that they're collecting. So the Facebooks of the world, the Googles of the world, the big fish of the world that are, you know, ultimately can be subpoenaed by the United States government. That's the issue. So you can apply it, but I think you're going to get pushback from your organization if you're located in the United States that you're being too restrictive, because there's that friction between the two.
Makes sense. Now, you mentioned CCPA. Some people have been mentioning that in chat. When these large states, enact these laws, as you said, other states follow, other states are doing similar things. What do you think is the appetite to have a unified US data breach law?
Okay, so here's Mary's opinion. We're going to have difficulty doing that because there are companies that are in existence right now that do nothing but sell your data. Each and every last one of you are used to an individualized experience when you interact with these social media platforms. You're in your own echo chamber. They have the AI technology that will give you the things that you say you quote unquote like, or the things that you share. You're being profiled. And so you have that individual experience. A privacy legislation will come in to play to allow you to choose to continue that experience or to have a more restrictive experience. And I honestly think that we've been so conditioned to the individualized experience that we're gonna select to give our privacy away anyway. The appetite in DC, the biggest problem is this whole idea of private right of action. And okay, basically the ability for you as an individual to sue a company for violating your privacy. That doesn't exist in many of these privacy legislations, although California does allow, if it's unencrypted information, if a company has a breach and they haven't did the appropriate security measures to protect your data, you can sue that company and get money without even proving damages. All that to be said, that's the problem, whether or not we're going to give citizens the right to sue companies for not protecting their privacy. And, you have of course, the tech companies like, no. You have the privacy folks saying, yes. And that's the battle, right? And whether or not the states that have gone forward and move forward, if the federal legislation is going to cover everything and make the states' laws mute, which unfortunately it goes against this country's foundation, where states can add protections where the federal government doesn't. So it's murky at best. I know.
Yeah, excellent. You just mentioned something that's related to a couple questions that came in. You mentioned in terms of California and the data not being encrypted. You mentioned this in your talk. In terms of, hey, what if your employer loses your PII? Is it, how do you handle PII information on employees' emails? What needs to be reported or not? Is that just a California thing? How's that, in the US and other countries?
As it stands right now, the employee has no protections. I mean, I've seen it firsthand in a couple of the companies that I've worked for, that they have lost employee information and it's not reportable. 2023, yes, California will, and then that's going to require a heavy lift by companies that are not used to protecting employee data. But if they actually go ahead and get their third party act together, which a lot of companies do not, but if they go ahead and get that together, they can actually provide protections, right, for that data, if you're ensuring that it's because a lot of companies, especially where employee data sits in HR, insurance, pay, benefits, and all those other carriers. So generally, in HR, it actually has all that information. So how does IT internally protect it when it's sitting in their environment, or is it, if it's not in their environment, how they're assessing vendors that they're working with?
Great. Hey, last question. People love the stories. Are there any other places where you can go for some of these privacy and legal related stories or cases, or where can people go get this type of information?
You call me. I don't know. I honestly, the intersection of privacy and information security is still very, very, very new. There's a couple of people that I know, but there's not something that's broadened. I mean, I touch on it a little bit in my nonprofit, but there's not any resources that I actually am aware of that you can actually go out. It's just find an attorney friend and take them out for a beer or a martini and sit down and have a conversation, right?
Nice. Hey, so Mary, what's the last word? Earlier you said, hey, not all privacy data breach laws are created equal. You shared a lot of insight with us today. Where would you leave the audience, all the CISOs, leaders, professionals here in the virtual room? What's your last parting words of wisdom?
Get an attorney friend. I mean, it really is not meant for information security IT folks to understand. There has to be a level of explaining to the lawyer and the lawyer explaining to you how these things work, because attorneys, I'm just different. Attorneys don't ultimately know what information security and technology is doing. They just know what the law says and they hand it over. So you just got to find a common set of communication between you and your attorney to say, okay, this is what we're doing. This is what the law says. You need help.
Hey, Mary, appreciate it, everybody. Let's give Mary a virtual round of applause. Thanks so much for the outstanding presentation.